Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. All right. Today, we begin a brand new topic, even though we're in the middle of the Gemara on our last Mishnah. That's because this Gemara is going to now talk about an aspect that was touched on by our Mishnah, and indeed, to some extent, relate to a question that Hanan asked, meaning you have a Pesach offering, and we'll just use Tzvi as the example. So Tzvi has a Pesach offering that, he has a nice sized family, but it's not going to be able to finish. And, he doesn't want the meat to go to waste, etc. And he, Baruch Hashem, he's sufficiently financially well off, but he doesn't want to just give away that the rest of that animal. He's friendly with Stan, who he's going to invite, but he doesn't want, he's not that friendly with Stan. So the question is, so now Stan wants to buy, Stan has set aside some money to buy a Pesach. Now, of course, Stan doesn't need a whole Pesach either, so it just so happens that they both need the exact right amount. So everything's wonderful from that perspective. Neither of them are any picky, so no, we don't have to worry about the thing that we just talked about. But the question is, how is it possible? Because in general, when we take money and we buy something to make it Kodesh, the way that money becomes no longer Kodesh is by creating a new Kodesh. But when Tzvi sells part of his Pesach offering to Stan, how can he use that money? Because the korban, the piece that he's going to be selling, is already sanctified. It's already a Pesach. Now, of course, all of this is happening, just to be clear, before the slaughtering, because as we said, you can't be counted in a group unless after the animal has been slaughtered. So we're all talking about before the animal slaughtered, and we got Bessie out back, and Bessie's a nice lamb, and or maybe it's I don't know. Do we know what Mary's lamb is named? I don't know. Okay, anyway, we'll call her Bessie. So the point is Bessie's out back, and so now the question is, how do we enable that? How does that transaction work? Because presumably Tzvi wants to be able to do whatever he wants with the money that Stan's going to pay him. And of course, Stan has set aside this money for the Pesach because that's the way you do it. When you're going to bring a Pesach offering, you got to set it.
I got it. I take the money, I slaughter Stan and eat the meat.
No, I don't think that would be kosher. Okay, so anyway, so that's what we're going to be talking about. Okay, so the ability of the owner of a lamb or a kid that has been set aside from Pesach to sell a share in that offering. And I'll give a little bit of a further introduction in a moment to that issue, because we need to know a Mishnah and a Brisa in order to understand this Gemara. The problem with the, quote unquote problem, I'll use the word problem loosely. The problem with the Gemara that we're going to learn is that you need to know the Gemara in order to learn the Gemara. So I'll give you the introduction that you need in a moment. But okay, so that's going to bring us to the next Mishnah, and that Mishnah is going to discuss the ability to slaughter a Pesach for someone who is currently tameh or otherwise unfit to eat the Pesach, but will become tahor that night. That's a topic that we've touched on a number of times. This is the main source, and we're going to note an Amoraic debate regarding one who is tameh from a sheretz. Again, that's something that we've touched on, but now we're going to see the Gemara live, so to speak. We're going to see the main Gemara on that topic. So again, before we begin discussing the ability of the owner to set us, and that'll be our day, and that'll bring us to the next Mishnah at the bottom, God willing, of Tzadi Amud Bet. So that's today's daf is Tzadi, daf Tzadi. And so before we begin, we need to know two things. One, there is a Mishnah in Tamura that says if one gave a harlot, first of all, I guess before we had zero, we need to know three things. First of all, you need to know that the Torah says that if you have an animal that you give to a prostitute, and that animal is in exchange for services rendered, or to be rendered, that animal is no longer fit to be offered as a sacrifice. Not only that, but you can't even use the thing other than money. You can't use the thing that you give to buy to exchange for an animal, okay, for a sacrifice. So that's point number one. Now the Mishnah says that if one gave a harlot an offering that he already set aside as an offering, meaning you already set this animal aside as a shlamim, and now you give it to the prostitute, it does not become forbidden as a payment for a harlot. And the Gemara and Mishnah use a verse to support this position. So they do not simply say, oh, well, of course it's not, it isn't a problem because it doesn't belong to you. They do not say that, meaning that on some level, the Gemara and Mishnah assume that there is some retained ownership level in this object that has been set aside as an offering. And the point is that once it's been set aside as an offering, you can't undo that. You're not going to be able to cause a problem with that if you give it to a prostitute. So that's point number one. The point number two is that Rebbe says in a brisa that we will eventually quote, but it's important to know it ahead of time before we go into this Gemara, that someone who pays the owner for a share in a Pesach, the owner can use that money as he chooses. Okay. Now, there could be two different reasons why this is the case, and the Gemara is going to touch on both of them. And so it's important to realize these two possible reasons. Reason number one is that the animal remains property of the owner. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. The reason number two is that actually the money that is consecrated. So when Stan consecrates the money that he's going to use to buy the interest in Tzvi's Pesach, that money is consecrated with the intent to allow the owner, when the person, the seller, to use it as he chooses. So when Stan gives the money to Tzvi, even though it was Kodesh, the money becomes non-Kodesh. So those are two different explanations for Rebbe's statement, and we'll need to know them both. So now we are at near the bottom of Pei Tet Amabet. We are at Tana Rabbanan. It's the second wide line, middle of the line. There's a little hay after Tuf and the Resh, and that's where we're picking up. Okay, so Tana Rabbanan. Hamamna acherim imo pischov al chigiso. You are allowed to include others with you in your Pesach and Chagiga offerings. Mos shebiyado chulin. And the money that you get into your hand is considered chulin, is considered, you can, the seller is allowed to do whatever he wants with it. The hamocher olaso ushlamav. However, if you try to sell an ola or a shlamim offering, lo asa v'lo klum, you haven't done anything. Umo shehein yiplulin adava. And the money that was used to buy it, the poor purchaser, the money that was used to buy that offering doesn't go to doesn't get returned to the purchaser. It gets put into a special kupa for voluntary offerings. But these voluntary offerings, according to Rashi, are not voluntary offerings of an individual. They're the special voluntary offerings for the community when the Mizbeach was not busy. So whenever the Mizbeach was not busy, they would use the money in this kupa to bring sacrifices. All right, so that's the brisa. So now we're going to try to understand, why is it that if you didn't accomplish anything, why does the money go into this kupa? So amarava knasa, right? It's a knas. We find the guy. The point is, and Rashi explains that, and Rashi quotes this interesting Rashi, this interesting Gemara in Erechim that says the mouse is not the thief, but rather the hole is the thief. That's what the Gemara says there. And what does it mean by that? It means that the seller's not responsible. The person who actually does, who's got the goods now is not responsible. It's the getaway. It's the fact that the person sold it to somebody else. So as a result, that's how Rashi's interpreting that mouse is not the thief, rather the hole is the thief. But in any event, the point is that the fine is on the buyer because he's the one who is the key new element in the while we generally say it takes two to tango, whoever sort of like they were giving the responsibility on the person who actually takes the first affirmative action, which is the paying of the purchase price. So that's the explanation. Uman kol shehen. So now when we said umaos kol shehen yiplu l'nadava, whatever the money is, it goes to the voluntary. It goes for this voluntary offering. So why? What is that reference to? Whatever it is, arba. Even though the animal may have only been worth 4. The havu le chamisha, and the purchaser gave him 5. Well, even that 5th amount gets knast. So even though he paid extra, it's the entire payment price, whatever it was paid, that all goes to this coupon. All right. So now we're ready to get into the complicated stuff for which the introduction was necessary. So Amar Ula, the Isam Rav Oshia. So some Ula said, or some say it was Rav Oshia. Efshar yad a chavrin bavle taima dehai milsa. Do any of our Babylonian, people from Bavel, friends from Bavel, know how to explain this? And again, this is the question that I raised at the very top. Zehevrish talel pisco. This one separates Tzvi separated the Pesach offering, so the Pesach offering is Kodesh. V'zehevrish mosla pisco, and the buyer set aside the money to be Kodesh. Hey hektish chala hektish. How is it possible for the Kodesh money to fall on the to apply to the Kodesh lamb or kid that has been set aside? The Katani Mos should be Yadachulin, right? And somehow the money becomes back to Chulin. So how does Hektish fall on Hektish and yet the money become Chulin? That's the question. Okay, do we understand the question? Because the key to understanding this Gemara is to understand this question.
So there's how many korbanot are we talking about here? One.
We only need to talk about the Pesach. So you set aside a Pesach. Now we'll use you and Eli as the example. So you set aside a Pesach. Eli has some money. He wants to participate in your Pesach. The problem is the following. Eli has set aside this money for Hektish purposes. Hektish money needs to effectively go on a non-hektish item, right, in order for it to.
I see. So it's already hektish. So
it's exactly, your Pesach is already hektish. So how does it work? That's the question. You totally get the question. Yeah. If everybody gets the question, we will continue. Okay. So now, again, remember that Brisa and Mishnah that I mentioned. So again, Amar Abaye tries to answer. If not for the fact, now you need to know, I would have no idea but for having gone through it already ahead of time. You have to know that this is referring to the Mishnah in Tamura. If not for the fact, now again, the Mishnah in Tamura says, right? The Mishnah in Tamura says that if one gave a harlot an offering that he had already set aside as an offering, it does not become forbidden as payment for a harlot. Okay, it does not become forbidden, and it's still hektish, and it still can be offered as a sacrifice. Okay, so if not for the fact that Rav Oshia said that Mishnah in Tamura was following the Mamneh Zona al Pisco, was talking about the situation of of including a zona as a Pesach. I'm sorry, did you have a question? Okay, including a zona as in the group for the Pesach, the Rebbe, and that it's in fact Rebbe. If not for the fact that Rabbi Yoshaya had done that, Havi Mokimna Lahahi, I would have said that Mishnah, the Kachim column, was talking about Kachim column, meaning all offerings that you eat. The Aliba the Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and it followed Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Why? The Amar Kachim column Mamon Balamhu, because he's the one who says that things of a lesser sanctity, those kachim kalim, those sacrifices that you eat, they are still considered mamon balimhi. those are still considered the property of the owner. And so as a result, the owner has the right to sell them. Okay. And as a result, the owner has the right in that Mishnah to give it to the Zona. So and that is why that Mishnah needs to tell us that it's a pasuk that takes it out, and it's not about the fact that he lacks ownership. And if that were true, if we were to set this aside and set it up like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, well then, when it comes to the Pesach offering, according to Rebbe, the point is that Rebbe says that the Pesach is fully Kodesh. Remember, Rebbe in a Brisa, we know that the other second. Now we need to remember the second part of the things that of the introduction, which is that Rebbe says in a Brisa that someone who pays the owner for a share in a Pesach, that owner can use the money as he chooses. And so now, so how do we explain that Brisa according to Rebbe? We will say that Brisa means not that the animal doesn't fully become hektish. It's not that he retains an ownership interest. Rather, the point is that the person who's giving the money, so either Eli or Stan in our two examples, that when they make that money hektish, they set it aside in a way that says that when they give it to Tzvi and to Hanan respectively, then that the money becomes no longer hektish. So and it's certainly that with respect to the money that we're talking about as the explanation for Rebbe's statement. To me, because when he first sets aside the money, he's specifically setting it aside in order to enable the seller to be able to use that money as he chooses. And now, and again, this is all a counterfactual. This is all Abaye, how he would explain it, but for Rebbe Oshia's statement. And then we're going to get, now he's got Rebbe Oshia's statement, so how he's going to actually explain it. But again, if not for Rebbe Oshia's statement, then I would say, V'ha Rebbe. And now this brisa of saying that the money in his possession is chulin, umishum hakimos shebiyada chulin. The point is that our brisa is talking about Rebbe, and that's why the money in his possession is chulin. How do we read this? Demos vaday mishayir inish, because that money is money that has been set aside to be limited, has been left over, a little bit of the hektish has not been fully put on the money, meaning that the money isn't totally hektish, but rather hektish in a way that when it gets transferred, it no longer retains its kodesh. But now, so that was how he would have explained it. But now that Reb Oshia says that Mishnah in Tamura is Rebbe, Lo Mukimna lay on a Rebbe. So then I can't attribute it to Rebbe. The Pesach Lo Mishayir Inish, because in fact the point is that the Pesach, it's that we're saying that the person must have an interest in the Pesach, because that's the only thing that makes sense. If the person didn't have an interest in the Pesach, if a person who sets aside the Pesach didn't have an interest in the Pesach, well then we should say that is the explanation of that Mishnah in Tamura. So as a result, Rebbe must say we no longer can use the explanation about the money not being fully consecrated to explain Rebbe's statement, but we have to use the fact that the animal somehow remains in the property of the owner. So the Pesach lo Mashayir Inish, right? So it must be the person does not. So we can't. I'm sorry. We can't say that he doesn't. That he does not limit the Pesach itself, right? Because the point is that he must have an ownership in the interest. Otherwise, the Mishnah in Tamura and the Gemara that follows it doesn't make sense, because the Gemara and the Mishnah both assume that there was no problem, no ownership issue with the client of the prostitute handing over the animal. So the haleka lo'okmi to Rabbi Yossi. Now we cannot attribute our brisa to Rabbi Yossi. So now, all right. So he's just to go through what he's doing. He's already said what he would like to answer, but the problem is that Rav Oshia says that the Mishnah in Tamura is according to Rebbe and not Rabbi Yossi HaGlili. So as a result, we need to revisit how Rebbe understands the concept of being able to sell the Pesach. And we can't say that it's about the money. We have to say it's about the Pesach itself, because it has to be about the Pesach itself, because we have to say that the owner has an ownership interest in the Pesach. Because if the owner doesn't have an interest in the Pesach, then when we say that Rebbe is the author of that Mishnah, it doesn't make sense, because the Mishnah requires the prostitute client to have an ownership interest in the Pesach, because otherwise there would be no chiddush in that Mishnah, because of course you can't give something you don't own to the prostitute, so that wouldn't be a problem. So okay, so we understand that Rebbe has to say that the problem is with when the person sets up the Pesach, they are setting up the Pesach to enable them to still have an ownership interest. All right. Now again, we can't say that our Bryce is like Rebbe Yossi. Why? Because in that Brisa, we say that selling a shlamim doesn't do anything. And Rebbe Yossi says that and shlamim are kachim kalim. And Rebbe Yossi says that you have an ownership interest in kachim kalim. So that aspect of that Brisa makes no sense according to Rebbe Yossi. So it can't be Rebbe Yossi. So v'hasha to ukma the Rebbe Oshi Allahi b'mamna zona al pischo. So now the Rebbe he. Now, so therefore, what does Rebbe Oshia say about the Mishnah in Tamura? He says that we're talking about where the person says that they're going to include the prostitute in his Pesach group in exchange for the services rendered, and Rebbe he, and that Brisa is following Rebbe. So Shema Mina, so we learn from this, Disvirale Afilu Bepisko Meshayar Inish. So we know that it means that Rebbe holds, that Rebbe believes that a person has an interest, a retaining interest in his Pesach offering. Okay, he retains that interest in his Pesach offering.
Don't you have to say that? I mean, you sanctified a Pesach, right?
Right.
You want to have other people in your Chavarah, right?
Right.
So you have to be able to say that you have to be able to do that, or else what's the point of sanctifying the Pesach?
So the other way of reading it is to say that no, you don't have an interest and you don't have the right to sell, but you have the right to accept a payment on behalf of to allow other people to be included in the group. So when you make your Pesach, it's you set aside the Pesach animal. You are not you're not able to sell an interest in that. Yeah. Rather, Stan is able to give you money that he sets aside for the Pesach, but purposely has in mind that he wants you to be able to use it as chulin. And when you accept it, so then he obtains an ownership, an interest in it. It's not that you're selling it; it's you're enabling the conveyance.
I see.
All right. It is a little bit stretched. It's a little bit far-fetched, but that's the alternative read. Now, you're right that the easier read is that you retain an ownership interest. There's no question that that's the easier read.
Okay, I get it. All right, thank you. All
right, so Mahi de Rabbi Yoshia. So so now we have to all right, okay. So now we are going to so now we got to give. So now we've essentially answered the whole thing, right? Because now we can say that both the Brisa and the Mishnah are Rebbe, and Rebbe says that it's got to be that the reason that it becomes chulin is because the person who sets aside the Pesach retains a little bit of ownership in it, and that ownership in it is what enables him to effectively sell the pieces that he's not going to eat. Okay, and so now the Gemara is finally going to give the background that we needed to understand all of what we just said. So first they're going to ask, so where was this Reb Oshia that he made this statement that Rebbe was the one who was the author of the Mishnah? So let's go through this. So Mahi the Rebbe Oshia. What was the statement of the Rebbe Oshia? The Tanan, it was like we learned in the Mishnah. Nasan la mukdashin be'esnena. Right. So again, this is the Mishnah that we were talking about in Tamura. This Mishnah is the one somebody gives a prostitute a consecrated item, so something that has already been made hektish. Harei elu mutarin, they remain permitted. Ofos the chulin, but if he gave her birds that were not consecrated, harei elu asurin, they are not allowed to be offered in the Beit HaMikdash. All right, shahaya bedin. Now this is a long Mishnah, so you have to be patient. Although it'll convert to a brisa in a moment without us being told. So thankfully, Art Scroll tells me that it turns to a brisa. Shahaya bedin, or I looked at the Mishnah and saw that the wording didn't continue. But so all right, shahaya bedin. So the logic would say the following: Uma es mukdashit. Now, but for the fact that we are going to say that a pasuk tells us otherwise, this is what I would have thought. Shahaya bedin. There's a logic. Ma'im mukdashim, that when it comes to consecrated items, shamum posel behen, that a blemish disqualified causes them to become invalid. Ein esnan ma'umachir chal aleihen, and they are not subject to this disqualification of the payment in exchange for services rendered for a prostitute. When it comes to birds, there is no blemish that disqualifies them. Shouldn't we say that a payment in exchange for services of a prostitute should certainly not cause them to become disqualified? So Talmud Lomar l'chol neder. So the pasuk says for any vow offering. So any includes the rabbos as a ophos. So the Mishnah says that it comes to teach us including ophos. Now we're going to look at the opposite direction. Now that we've shown that birds are subject to esnan zona, to the esnan zona prohibition, well then why don't we say, let's learn in the other direction and say that a consecrated item should certainly also be subject to the esnan zona prohibition. Okay, and it goes like the following. And now this is a brisa as opposed to the continuation of the Mishnah, but it's written here as if it was a continuation of the Mishnah. So kal v'chomer l'mikdash miyata. So now we should say that we have a kal v'chomer in the other direction. Ma ophos she'ein hamum posel behen esnan umchir chal aleihen. Right. So birds which do not have which a blemish does not cause them to become invalid as an offering, esnan umchir chalahem, but yet they are subject to disqualification of a zona's payment. So mukdashin, when it comes to consecrated items, shamum posel behen, eino din she'esnan umchir chalahem. Shouldn't it certainly cause it an esnan zona? And mechir refers to, by the way, the price for a dog, because that's part of that same pasuk. If you buy a dog with an animal, that animal can no longer be used as a korban. So Talmud Lomar l'chol neder. So the point is that the Torah says l'chol neder prat l'nadur. The point is that when it comes to a neder, it's any future offering, but not something you've already offered. So as a result, if you've already made the vow to make this animal kodesh, well, then it's not a problem. So elat taima. So now 1 second. So the only reason that now we're going to analyze this brisa that we just quoted to say the elat taima. The only reason, because of Rahman and Neder, the only reason that the esnan zona it's not subject to the esnan zona rule is because the Torah says the word neder. Hi lav hachi. But for that fact, hava aminu mukdashin chal iser esnan aleihen. We would have thought that for consecrated items that they would be subject to a zona. But 1 second, ein adam oser davar she'ena shelo. We have a general prohibition that says that we have a general rule, that says that a person cannot cause something to become forbidden if he doesn't own it. So I'm a Reb Oshia. So now Reb Oshia, this is where Reb Oshia made his statement. We're talking about one who registers a zona for his Pesach offering, the Rebbe, and it's according to Rebbe. And so again, Abaye would have answered this question by saying, no, it's like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and that it's based on the fact that Kachim Kalim can be owned. But Reb Oshia instead answers no, it's Rebbe, and we're talking about the Esnan Zona of exchanging a Zona services for a Pesach offering. So my Rebbe, so now 1 second. So now we've explained where Reb Oshia made his statement. Now we got to explain where Rebbe made his statement. The rest of the daf will go a lot faster after this. So my Rebbe, the Tanya, v'im yim'at habayit miyot niseh. What happens if we have a brisa that if the house is the Torah says that the household is too small for a lamb. So now the interesting thing is that the wording mihiyot niseh it seems to be an odd wording. It says it should be in the imyamat habayit niseh, but the mihiyot niseh we're going to learn from it like two different kind of parallel languages. So the Tanakama of the Brisa says, Hachayehu miseh. The point is that you are allowed to sustain the lamb from the lamb. You're allowed to sustain it from the proceeds of the lamb, meaning that you could sell it. You could sell pieces of it. So mikdei achila. However, that is only if you need it for eating the lamb, below mikdei mekach, but not to buy anything you want. Rebbe Omer, however, Rebbe says, Af mikdei mekach. You can buy whatever you want. Shim ein lo, because if you don't have enough money for your own needs, mamna acher imo al piskov al kiguso, you can count somebody else in your Pesach and your Chigi offering. Umamach uma'us shebiyado chulin, and his possessions are chulin. So again, the she'al menas kain hikdishu Yisrael es pischeihen, because this was the basis for Jews to consecrate their Pesach offerings in the first place. So exactly as you wanted to read Hanan, right? You want to say the point is of course, when you make your Pesach offering a Pesach, you're saying I'm retaining an ownership so that I can sell the pieces of it to somebody else. So in second. So now, first we're going to do a debate on this brisa, and then we're going to get to a question. So I'm sorry, I'm not moving this along. So okay, so here we go. So Rabba Rebbe Zera, they disagree. Chad Amar be'etzim tliyaso. One says that where are they kulei alma lo pligi, that when it comes to wood for roasting, everybody agrees that everything is okay. The kevan the takanta the Pesachu, because it's all for the Pesach, kugufa the Pesach dami. That's still like the Pesach itself. Ki pligi, where do they disagree? The matzah and maror, when it comes to matzah and maror, Rabbanan savre achila achrisihi. Rabbanan said, the rabbis say that the Tanakama says that it's a different eating. Rebbe saver kevan the achshiru the Pesachu kugufa the Pesach dami. That Rebbe says no, it's even like the Pesach itself, because even the maror matzah and maror, because you have to eat it with it. So as a result, it's like the Pesach itself. The other one says that actually the debate is even when it comes to the matzah and maror, they don't disagree. Because the Torah says that you need to eat it with matzah and maror. Because those are considered associated with the Pesach. They're like preparation for the Pesach. And that should be considered like the Pesach itself. So keep pligi, where do they disagree? Likach bo talis. If you want to buy a shirt or a cloak, some kind of talis, so then Rabbanan Sabre Miyotni said the point. Amar Rahmana, the point is that Torah says that you have to be for the seh and Hechayehu Laseh. So it's got to help the lamb on some level. The Rebbe says no. Hechayei atzmecha miseh. He reads it that when it comes to when it says for a lamb, when it says mihiyot miseh, it means hachaya atzmacha miseh. It means that you should be able to sustain yourself, i.e., you can use it for anything you want. Oh, 1 second. So Abaye de Amar. Now 1 second. Abaye in the very beginning said ilav de ukma me Rabbi Yoshia lahi b'mamna zona al pischo. The Rebbe, if not for the fact that Reb Oshia had said that this Mishnah in Tamura was talking about a payment for a zona in exchange for interest in a Pesach, and that it was Rebbe, Habi Mukminan La B'Kachim Kalam. I would have said that it was Kachim Kalam. Vali with the Rebbe Yossi Aglili, and I would have said that it was Rebbe Yossi Aglili. The Amr Kachim Kalam Mamun Ba'alimhu, because Kachim Kalam belongs to the owner. Aval the Pesach Lo Mashayir Inish, but in a Pesach, the person doesn't retain an ownership interest according to Rebbe. So 1 second, Hakatana behedra. But it seems like Rebbe himself taught the opposite, right? Rebbe said, Sha'al manas kain hikdishu Yisrael es pischayim, right? Hakatani behedra. Sha'al manas kain hikdishu Yisrael es pischayim. So it seems clear that the point is that was the basis on which the Jews Israel consecrates their Pesach offerings, meaning that they leave over a little bit so that they can sell it. So the Gemara explains, no, Ema, you could say that when Abaye was going to interpret Rebbe as saying that it was about the money, you could say Sha'al Manas Kein Hikdishu Yisrael Ma'os Pischehen. What Rebbe really meant is that on this basis the Jews consecrated the money for their Pesach. So that was very complicated. Oh no. 2 seconds. So hopefully I'm not going to lose everybody.
You can't, we know where you live.
Okay. All right. So now we've explained this complicated Gemara. I apologize for this box that you probably can't see, but it's giving me a warning that something's going to happen in a few moments. All right. So now the Mishnah, now we get to the next Mishnah. So the next Mishnah says the following. So Zav, again, the Mishnah is going to talk about permitting slaughtering for Pesach for one who is Tameh at the time of the slaughter of the Pesach, but will become Tahor by the time they're supposed to eat it. Okay, so we're going to deal with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cases. 5 cases. So case number 1, Zav Sharash de Re'ios. If you have a male Zav who sees a discharge and he's seen 2 discharges and needs to wait 7 days before he can become tahor, shochet avalav b'shvi. He can, but he doesn't need to bring Rashi explains he doesn't need to bring a chatas offering. He doesn't need to bring an atonement offering. So as a result, when he goes to the mikvah on day 7, so then that night he becomes tahor. So shochet alav b'shvi. So we can slaughter for him on the 7th day. Rosh Shalosh, if he saw 3 discharges, so now he needs to bring a korban on. He needs to bring a korban on. Oh, okay. I got 9 minutes later. Okay. It needs to bring a korban on the 8th day. So again, the process is he saw 3 discharges. So now he has to wait 7 clean days. On the 7th clean day, he goes to the mikveh during the day. He becomes tahor that night. The next morning, he brings a korban. That's day 8. So now, if the 8th day is Erev Pesach, well then shochatin alav b'shmini shelo. So then he can bring the korban Pesach on the 8th day, even if he has not yet brought the atonement offering. Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom. Now, case number 3: a woman who's observing one day against another day. Shochatin alav b'sheni shelo. Again, a woman who sees one day of bleeding not during her period time. So as a result, she just needs to watch 1 clean day. And so as a result, assuming that the next day was clean, she can go to the mikveh in the morning and she'll be clean at night. So as a result, we can shecht for her on the 2nd day. Rasa Shnei Yamim, if she now sees 2 consecutive days, then shochatin b'yom bashlishi. We can, again, she also, somebody who just sees 2 days also only needs to observe 1 additional day. And so as a result, we can shecht for her on the 3rd day. That's case number 4. The Hazava, case number 5, a full woman who becomes a full-fledged Zava, who she sees discharges for 3 consecutive days, shokan alav b'shmini. We can shecht for her on the 8th day, because again, she needs to see 7 clean days, and then on the 8th day, she brings an atonement offering, and then she becomes good. And so even the Mishnah is understood to mean that even if she has not yet brought the atonement offering, since she can bring that atonement offering, she will be tahor. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Shochatin v'zorkin al tvul yom u'mechusar kapurim. You can, Rav says that we can shecht for somebody who is a tvul yom, somebody who went to the mikvah already and is going to become tahor that night, but the night has not yet fallen, u'mechusar kapurim, and somebody who lacks atonement, meaning that all they have to do is bring a korban. All right, and now we're on Sadak Amabet. But you're not allowed to slaughter for a Pesach offering or throw its blood for one who is contaminated by a sheretz. Be'ula Amar, Be'ula disagrees. Shochdim v'zorkin al tamei sheretz. No, we can even do it for a tamei sheretz. So now the Gemara is going to, the rest of this Gemara is going to try to understand how Rav works with our Mishnah, because it seems like based on our Mishnah, a Tvul Yom, why should a Tvul Yom be different from somebody who's a tamei for a sheretz? So L'Rav, we're going to ask the question: why is a Tvul Yom different than a sheretz situation? The Chazil Orta, that person will become a Tvul Yom will be set at night and will be tahor at night. Tamei sheretz nami Chazil Orta, he could also be tamei that night. All he has to do is go to the mikvah and he'll be tahor at night. So mechusar tefillah. No, the problem is that he lacks immersion. So Tvul Yom Nami, 1 second, but a Tvul Yom also is missing something. He's Mechusar Ha'arav Shemesh. He's missing the fact that it didn't fall nightfall yet. Okay, so okay. So no, Shimshim and Mela Arba, no, the sun sets by itself. So there's no thing that he needs to do. It happens automatically. Oh, 1 second. Mechusar b'Kippurim Nami. 1 second. Mechusar b'Kippurim also you said is fine. And Ha Mechusar Kapara, but he lacks atonement and he still needs to do something. So Shekinu biyado. No, we're talking about where he already is holding onto the pair of birds that he needs to bring, and so as a result, that's not the problem. So Tamei sheretz nami hare mikvah lefanav. He can have the mikvah right in front of him. So why should it make a difference whether or not he's got the birds already? That you can have the mikvah right there. So Dilma Pesha, maybe he'll be negligent. 1 second, nami. Maybe the person who needs atonement will also be negligent. Dilma Pesha, maybe he'll be negligent. No. We're talking about where you already gave your korban to the Beis Din. So as to the Beis Din of Kohanim, Uked Rav Shmaya, the Amar, and it's like Rav Shmaya who said, Chazoka ein Beis Din shel Kohanim om de misham ad sheyichlu ma'os sheba shofarot. They would not, the Beis Din of the Kohanim would not get up from the Beis Hamikdash until all the money that was set aside that was put in the shofarot, into which are referred, it is like basically the kupa, that's the boxes. They were set up with like a shofar to put the pushkas. So until all that money was used, they would not get up. Meaning anybody who gave them the funds or the animals for a korban, they would make sure that the korban happened. Ula Rav. So in second, all right. So now we understand why, because we're saying that the money has all been set aside, and so the person himself has nothing left to do. Unlike the case of the tamei sheretz, where he still has something left to do. So Ula Rav. So now, according to Rav, what you've just said is that that really the person is fit. Even a tamei sheretz, right? Why did we say what's the concern is Dilma Pesha? Well, Dilma Pesha, that is a rabbinic concept to say that maybe he'll be negligent, so we're not going to let him. So Midoraisa Michsi Chazi, that seems to suggest that he's fit from a biblical level. The Rabbanon who degaz Rebbe, and it's only the rabbis who make the decree about him. Alama Amarav Matamin Echad Mehen B'Sheretz. But we learned a few weeks ago that a few weeks ago, or within the last few weeks, that when you had a 50-50 split between the people who are tamei and the people who are tahor, that Rav said that you would make somebody tamei for a sheretz in order to make the majority tamei. But 1 second, we just said that biblically that doesn't do anything. Biblically, somebody should be able to be to bring an offering for a tamei sheretz. It's only the rabbis who say that it's a problem. So we now need to give a new answer. Ella l'rav midoraisa nami lo chazi. We have to say that even doraisa, it's also not fit. Dixiv, because and why is it not fit? Ish kiyet tamei lanefesh. Because the Torah says any person who becomes tamei for from a corpse. So milo askinan shechal shvi shalo lio be'erev haPesach. So this has got to it must be, and we're going to see why in a little while. It must be that we're talking about the seventh day of where the person is Tameh and is going to, that the seventh day of their Tuma falls on Erev Pesach. And so that night, they'll become Tahor, Dahainu Tuma Sheretz, which is equivalent to the situation of Tuma Sheretz. And the Torah says that we have to postpone such a person, meaning that even though a person will become tahor that night when they're tamei mace, they are automatically deferred. 1 second. So if you say, how do we know that this is the case? It's because Savar Rabbi Yitzchak de Amar, Rav holds like Rabbi Yitzchak in the following brisa. What did he say? Tamei mace mitzvah hayu. That when this is a statement. This is talking about the people in the time of the in Sefer Bamidbar. What was the story that they were tamei? So we're saying that they were tamei because they were cleaning out the bodies of Aaron's 2 sons who were killed, and so they were tamei meis mitzvah. And shechal shvi shelahen liyop erev Pesach, and the 7th day for them fell on erev Pesach. Shene'amar v'lo yachlu la'asos haPesach bayom hahu, because the Torah says that on that day they were not able to make the Pesach offering. Bayom hahu hu de'enan yacholim la'asos. It was that day that they couldn't do it. Aval l'machar yacholim la'asos, but the next day they would have been able to. And yet, nonetheless, v'amar rachmana nidchu, and the Torah still said that they had to be deferred. So that's the reading of Rabbi Yitzchak of the Torah. And so as a result, Rav holds along the lines of that reading. And so as a result, he says that even because of the analogy. Oh no, I'm going to be 40 seconds. Oh my gosh. All right. Even the analogy of the analogy. Oh shoot! I lost my train of thought. That the all right.
The nidchu is they have to do the Pesach Sheni.
That's right. They have to do the Pesach Sheni. And the point is that the analogous situation is that somebody who's tamei mace on the 7th day is equivalent to somebody who is tamei from a sheretz on that day. So all right. So I presume that my computer is going to restart now. I am going to change over to my phone, and we will finish. Okay. Oh, you can still hear me? Yes, I see that you can still hear me. So I'm changing over to my phone right now. Now you can hear me. You hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So my apologies for that confusion. All right. My computer did not realize that I was going to get an update, and it was going to force me to restart my computer. All right. So Tanan. So now again. So we've challenged Rav once, and he survived the challenge. We're going to challenge him again. Tanan. We learned in our Mishnah. Again, our Mishnah. Zav Shira Shtei Riyos. If the Zav sees 2 discharges, Shochatin Alav B'Shvi, we're allowed to slaughter for him on the 7th day. My Lav Delo Tavil. I would have thought that we're talking about that where he hadn't yet done Tvila. Ushma Mina Shochatin B'Zarkin Al Chametz Sheretz. So therefore, we should be able to say that when it comes to a sheretz, you can be able to shech for that person as well. And no, the Gemara says lo to Tavil. No, we could say that he was Tovel. Actually, he Tovel. 1 second, if he was Tovel already, my Kamash Malan. What's the big chiddush? Hakamash Malan. No, there is still a big chiddush. The Afal Gav the Mechusar Ha'arev Hashemish, that even though he lacks the setting of the sun, the Shimsham Kamash Malan, the Shimsham and Mela Arba. We comes to teach us that because the sun is going to be automatic, that's why it's okay. Hachanami Mistabra, and actually this all even makes sense. Why? Because in the end, the next thing in the Mishnah is Rosh Shalosh if he sees 3 discharges. So Shochat and Alav B'Shmi, that we slaughter for him on the 8th day. Amra Bishlama, if you say the following, it makes sense. Zav Sharash Shochat and Alav B'Shmi de Tabil. That it must be talking about that he already went to the mikvah when he saw 2 discharges. Why? It's because then we need to tell you that the person on the 8th day also goes. I would have thought that if you saw
two charges and you do it on and so you can check on the seventh day. Why? Because there's no action that's required. But when it comes to the eighth day and seeing three discharges and bringing the korban pesach on the eighth day, the mechusar maaseh, because you're lacking a positive action, mechusar kapara, because he needs to bring a korban for atonement. So then maybe you would not be able to do it. Kamash Malan. So that's why the Mishnah needs to tell us the Apal Gav, the Mechusar Kapara, even though he's missing atonement, Shochatim Bezorkin Ilave, we can still slaughter for him. Ella Amr. But if you were to say Ra'ash De Re'iyos B'Shvi Lo Tavil, but if you say that it's the case of when you saw two discharges and it's on the seventh day that he had not yet gone to the mikvah, Ra'ash Shalosh B'Shvini Lamali. Why do I even need to bother telling you about the three discharges? Hashda Yesh Lomar. Actually, we could say Ra'ash De Re'iyos B'Shvi Delo Tavil, that just as we say that one who experiences two discharges can have the shechting happen on the seventh day, and because he's not immersed, because it's a full-fledged tuma, and yet we can slaughter and throw blood for him. So Rosh Shalosh B'Shmini, when we deal with somebody who's seen three discharges and now it's the eighth day, the Tavalei B'Shvi, because you had to, it's the eighth day, you went to the mikvah on the seventh day. The Kalisha Tuma, that's going to be a lesser kind of Tuma. Lo Kolsha came to Shechtinan, the Zartinan Aleve. Certainly we should be able to shecht and throw blood for him so that he can have the Pesach. Elalav Shma Mina. So must be, right? We must be that actually Rav is the one who's correct. That Rosh Re'iyos B'Shvi, the Shechtinan Ilave, the Tabil. It must be that the one who saw two discharges and now it's the seventh day and we're shechting for him, it must be that he went to the mikvah. Because otherwise, we wouldn't need to tell you about the eighth day. So no, the Gemara says that's not a good proof for Rav, and we can still say Ula's position. Lo olam emalach lo de lo tav. Because we can say that really we're talking about where he has not immersed the itzterich, and we still need that additional statement. Because I would have thought because when it's on the seventh day, everything is in his hand because he's going to the mikvah. When it comes to the eighth day, because he's not the one who actually brings the korban. Maybe the kohanim will be negligent. Kamash Malan, not so. Rav Shmaya, like Rav Shmaya said, that the kohanim they don't get up until all the offerings have been made. All right, now the Mishnah said that the zaba is, we shecht for a zaba, a full-fledged zaba on her eighth day. Tana Kamei de Rav Ada bar Ahava. This was taught in front of Rav Ada bar Ahava. The hazaba shochatin aleha b'shvi shala. The Brisa was taught that said that you shecht for her on the seventh day. So Amar Lei, Rav Ada says back to the guy, Zaba b'shvi shala mi havya chazia. How is she fit to have a korban pesach brought for her on the seventh day? She needs to wait until the eighth day. Even if somebody who says that you can shecht a pesach for somebody who is tummy for a sheretz, honey mili tmei sheretz. That's when the tummy sheretz the chazul orsa that they'll be fit at night. This person needs kapara, which doesn't happen until the eighth day. So Ema B'Shmini. So no, Rav Ada says it's got to be you got to teach the brisa that it's on the eighth day. So one second, Pshita, if it changes to the eighth day, well then it's obvious. No, it's not obvious. The Gemara says Mahu Tema. I would have thought Kavan de Mechasu kapara, since she lacks an atonement, Kamash Malan, Kidu Rav Shmaya, that even though she lacks an atonement on the eighth day, you can still bring the Pesach for her because the Kohanim won't get up until she has her offering has been made. Ravina says, Nida Tani Kameh. It wasn't about this statement, this whole discussion that we just had. We're going to redo it and we're going to talk about a Nida as opposed to a Zaba. And that it was all about a Nida. But Hanida, and what was the statement? The Hanida Shochatin ala b'shvi, that a Nida was shechted on the seventh day. Amar Lei and Rav Ada said back to the guy, Nida b'shvi michazia, is the Nida fit on the seventh day? No. Afilu l'manda Amar Shochatin l'zorkin al tamei sheretz. Even according to the person who says that we can shecht a Pesach for somebody who is tummy for a sheretz, that's only because the chazi la'orsa, he's going to be fit at night. Nida la'orsa deshvi hu de tabla, but a Nida that she only immerses on the seventh day. At the end of the seventh day, after it becomes nightfall, lo chazia, she's not able to eat she's not able to eat the next night until 1 second. Did I just skip something? Ashmini de Abda Erev Shemesh Lo Chazia. She's not fit until the night of the 8th to eat kudshim, even though for our purposes we consider her tahor with respect to intercourse and having relations. When it comes to actually eating from a korban, she's not fit until the next night. Ella ema b'shmini. So as a result, Rav Ada says, no, it's got to be on the 8th day. 1 second, again, we have the question. Pshita, isn't that obvious? So hashta umazava the mechaser kapara, that just like we say with a zava when she's a mechaser kapara, that shoftin v'zorkin ala b'shmini nida delo mechaser kapara tzrika lamemer de shachtina b'zarkina nala. 1 second, this is an even more obvious case than the zava. When it came to a zava, we say that we will shecht for her on the 8th day. When it comes to a nida, she requires no atonement. So she's not even like the Zava who requires an atonement sacrifice to be brought on the 8th day. Right. So why isn't this super duper obvious? No, Nida Israelite. We still need to teach about the Nida Hakamashmon. And this is what it's teaching. Bashmini Ein B'Shvi'i Lo. That the whole purpose was to say, you might have thought that it would have been okay to do it on the 7th day. No. And I'm telling you, it's not okay to do it on the 7th day. It's only okay to do it on the 8th day. Kidatanya, as we learned in a brisa, kol chayavik tvilos, anybody who's chayav to go to the mikvah, tvilasan bayom, they go to the mikvah during the day, with the following exceptions: nida b'yoletis tvilasan balayla. Except for a woman who is a nida and somebody who gave birth, they go to the mikvah at night. Tanya, and further, we have another proof that this is the case. I would have thought that she could go to the mikvah while it's still day. She needs 7 full days to be in separation. Now, of course, the 7 full days are really actually talking about from the time her period starts, not when she has 7 clean days. But that's the modern understanding of nida, so we won't go into that right now. We can do that when we do Maseches Nida. So she needs to be able to be in her state of separation for a full 7 days. The yoledet itakesh lenida, and a woman who has given birth is compared to a nida. So that is why both of those women end up going to the mikvah at night and not during the daytime. Of course, in any certain circumstances, there can be circumstances where we will allow a woman to go who's in need to go to the mikveh during the daytime. Please talk to your local Orthodox rabbi.
All these cases we were talking about when you're tahara, you're becoming tahor erev Pesach, right?
You're coming tahor erev Pesach. No, you're coming tahor the night of the 15th. You don't become fully tahor until it's nightfall and it's the 15th.
Right. In other words, the time that you're going to eat the korban Pesach.
Correct. Okay. But on Erev Pesach, you're still something. You're still mechuser kapara. You're still.
Erev Pesach is when you eat the
is when you shecht it.
Okay.
Erev Pesach is when you shecht.
I see. Okay. No, but she's becoming tahor, or they're becoming tahor right about the time they're going to eat the korban Pesach.
That's exactly right. That's exactly.
But if in a situation where like you saw another zav or something like that, you have to wait till the next day to
Yes, then definitely not.
They're out, right?
They're definitely out. They're completely out. In the first 6 days of a zav who sees it twice, or the first 7 days of a nida, or the first 7 days of a zava, or a full-fledged zav. All of those situations, tough luck. You're not.
All these cases we're talking about, it just so happened it corresponded that the end of the period is the night of the 15th.
That's exactly right.
Right. Okay.
And this is the core question about: do we say that a tamei sheretz, because you could go to the mikvah and could then become tahor at night, right, we're going to allow the shechting? That's what Ula says.
Right.
Or do we say, no, it is too bad for you that there's nothing more to be done?
Right. I get that. Yeah. I see. Yeah, because you have to do something, right?
Exactly. So, an interesting debate. All right. Well, this is where we'll pick up. Thank you for your patience. Sorry for the computer problems. If any, Ellie, I just so that you know, I have the what I show on the screen is a shared document. If I don't know that I've shared it with you, I'm happy to do so. I'll try and do that right after we get off.
Okay. Shabbat shalom.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
Take care.
Thank you.